We are here to talk about SmartBear's Collaborator and keeping up with Collaborator versions 13.4 and 13.5. So our agenda today is to talk about updates and what we have done with Collaborator recently. A few housekeeping items as we kick off our session today. Let me go ahead and make sure. All right, we are indeed. So our session today is being recorded. Please post your questions to the Q&A channel, and we will have an additional Q&A session at the end for any additional questions that may come to mind as we go through today's presentations. But please, thank you, Matt. I appreciate the feedback on the audio. I hope everybody can see my screen. I should have asked that question at the beginning, but we are going to go ahead and move forward. So my name is Mel Gage. I am a solutions engineer here at Collaborator at SmartBear, supporting the Collaborator product. And joining me today is Jonathan Fortunati.
Next, jump.
There we go.
Wasn't sure if me or Andrew were going to go next. Yep, manager of solutions engineering here at SmartBear, help support the Collaborator product as well as a few others.
And Andrew Murata.
Yep, and I'm the senior marketing specialist on Collaborator.
Excellent. Thanks, gentlemen. So for questions today, please post those to the Q&A channel. John's going to be monitoring those for us today and responding there, or passing those over to me to answer in real time, should our workflow permit. So SmartBear, as one of my sales reps likes to say, we are the biggest little company you may have never heard of, and we cover a huge range of products. They were focused on Collaborator as a peer review tool. But just to give you some idea of what we do bring to the table in addition, we've been around now since 2009. Collaborator was actually one of the very first products for SmartBear. We are a global organization spread out across different areas with offices in Galway and in Australia. And we continue to add to our product solution suites with additional acquisitions. We have greatly expanded our user base over the last year or two, up to 16 million plus users with over 24,000 organizations as customers. We support open source initiatives, and we continue to grow our employee base to support you with the best products we can produce. Speaking of those products, our portfolio is wide and deep, from design with Cucumber Studio and Swagger Hub, through the creation process with Service V and today's product Collaborator, as well as Test Left, and then those testing suite applications that many of you may be familiar with, such as Test Complete. I also support Load Ninja as a performance testing tool. And then with the mobile space, we have also brought on board Bitbar, so we can be your full service design, create, test, and then with alert site, monitor organization. So if you have needs beyond just the peer review we're talking about today, please feel free to reach out and visit smartbear.com for more information on those tools. So today's agenda, we're going to be looking at the Collaborator infrastructure and see how Collaborator fits into your process strings. We're going to talk about the updates to Collaborator, specifically with 13.4 and 13.5, and we've had so many updates recently, I may be actually adding in additional information beyond those two, but those will be the main focus for today. We're going to look at a new features demonstration, going through a basic workflow with Q&A at the end of the demonstration. And then we're going to have a surprise announcement from Andrew, as well as an upcoming event. So at this time, we're going to kick off the first of one of our polls today. And Andrew, if you would, please. There you go. Are you currently a Collaborator user? And just for your information, we are collecting information on your responses, so these are not anonymous polls today. So feel free to take that as you will, answer the questions. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback. So we'll let that run for a few moments. And we'll go ahead and step into our first topic for today, the Collaborator infrastructure. So Collaborator is a peer review tool for code and document review. It sits in the middle of a very wide infrastructure. We tie in with webhooks integrations into many of the Git repository systems, such as GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps, and Bitbucket. We've seen explosive growth as the industry has in those particular repository systems, so we continue to develop enhancements around those particular integrations. In the meantime, we do maintain our legacy integrations through the enterprise client GUI with Git and Subversion, as well as Perforce, PTC Integrity, and many others that you may still be in use in your tool strings. We tie into Jira for issue tracking using that same webhooks integration that we deploy with the Git repository systems, making it very easy to communicate between Collaborator and Jira and your other repositories to track the issues that you've identified in your workflows with Collaborator. I've also added document review to my infrastructure here. It's something that I had neglected to add. We're going to touch on document review today, and I'm going to be demonstrating the manual upload process for document review, but it can also be tied in through Git or Subversion or some of your other platforms that handle binary files. Bring those documents and use that as your source control for documents as well. We are, as an organization, continuing to develop Collaborator, and we have a huge focus on document review right now. And we are looking for feedback as to what types of repository systems you may be using that we might consider for future integrations. In addition to the standard integrations we've already developed, we have a command line integration that gives you access to many of the tools and features within Collaborator directly from a command line, as well as a JSON API that provides that same type of communications to other applications that also support their own API interface. Beyond those two, we also support a set of server-side triggers that you can use to kick off things like Jenkins CI/CD process automation when certain events happen within Collaborator. So let's move on to the topic of our updates. So Collaborator 13.5 has been out now for a couple of weeks. And the first thing that I want to show, and this comes up quite often, what is your release cadence for Collaborator? How often do you put out new versions? So I honestly didn't know. So I went back to our website where we list all of our version releases, as well as the bug fixes and feature updates that we put out with each version. And did some calculations, ran it in a spreadsheet. So I've been on board with SmartBear now since September of 2019. So I honestly have not worked with anything older than version 12. And we can see that development from version 11 to 12 took just over 2 years, but we had many point releases in the middle. And the typical time frame from for our major version releases is 1 to 2 years. You can see we came out with 13 just under a year after we launched 12. And our next release, 13.6, is coming soon, actually next month. And we are looking forward to our next major release, probably sometime later this year or early next year. But we can see our minor version release cadence is anywhere from 30 to 100 days, depending on how quickly we're developing those new features or addressing those issues. And then the patch releases are anywhere from 1 to 90 days. And I say 1 because what day is he? December 30th of 2020, we launched 13.4. December 31st, we released 13.4.01 because it was a patch that had to come out. So that is my one-day outlier. It's typically much longer before we're doing the patch releases because Collaborator has historically been a very stable platform. So Collaborator improvements. So in version 13.4, we added some new features. We did mention other users in your comments and defects using an @mention functionality, and we're going to see that today. We've added auto-polling for new repositories to make it even easier to manage your repositories as you set those up in your systems like GitLab and GitHub. I'm going to be demonstrating out of GitLab today, and I'll show you how that auto-polling for new repositories works. We have in-app notifications that are tied to those @mentions as well. One of my favorite new features, version info in the comments and defects. So as we're going through and adding comments, adding defects in our Diff Viewer, we're going to see how we actually tag which file in the review process was tagged and what which file is tagged with that particular information. As we upload new versions of those documents, it will automatically update that information as needed when you add new comments and defects. Support for GitHub Teams in pull requests. So we wanted to be able to add your GitHub Teams directly into the pull requests through the reviewers field, as well as through the code owners. And just as an example of how your feedback and your requests on features do matter, this actually came from a request from one of our customers that really needed that particular feature implemented. They put in the feature request and it's now in Collaborator. Expandable chat panels give you a little bit more room in your Diff Viewer. We'll look at that today. And we can also, through our roles configuration, restrict moving push pins to the creator of those push pins for document review. So a whole host of information on 13.4. And then with 13.5, we've made even more changes. If you're doing document review and you're uploading files manually, as we're going to see today, you can actually now use different file names for the same document. This is something that you simply select a button next to your document in your review materials, and then select that new version of the file with the different name, and it will update Collaborator to use that file and diff it against the previous version that had been uploaded. We support a mark all red on the review materials level. This does have to be enabled in the server. I do have it enabled in my demo server today, so we'll see that. It makes it much easier for your users to come in and simply click one button and mark all those items red. Fully understanding that being able to disable that was necessary, as you want to make sure in some cases that your authors are actually going in and reading those materials, those items as well. We're supporting merge request pipelines for GitLab. This is tied directly into GitLab pipelines through your pipeline YAML files. You can specify merge onlys to require that Collaborator review as well, in addition to the standard pipeline features that you're used to in our pull requests. We support SAML SSO membership sync improvements. So what this has to do is you can generate tokens now for your SSO memberships and actually use this in the enterprise client GUIs for your login information as well. We've updated our mail libraries to support TLS version 1.2. We have also updated Collaborator that changing your review group will retain existing template and filled in checklist items. So if you need to make a change on the review group, it's not going to negate the information you had already collected from that previous group. And then again, many minor updates and bug fixes. In addition to, and I do want to bring this up real quick, let me see if I can get to this fairly quickly. If we go out to support.smartbear.com, we can choose our Collaborator product, and in our documentation, we can get to what's new and see all of those important changes that we've made in addition to everything that I've been talking about today. In addition to what's new, and I need to see if I can find this particular link. They've kind of hidden it in an unusual place. I think it's under version history. Yes. If you want to be notified when we release updates to Collaborator, there is now an option for a Collaborator release notification. So you can come in here, register your email, and get those notification emails when we release new versions of Collaborator that will give you links directly back to our support site here, where you can quickly see what we've added to Collaborator and how we have made those improvements and addressed any patches or defects. So please feel free to take advantage of that. So let's go through a basic review workflow and take a look at some of these brand new features and how they work within Collaborator. So I'm going to go back to my Collaborator server and log in. And I'm going to show you one of the features that wasn't listed here. I believe it was actually prior to version 13.4, but it's one of my favorite features, so I do want to show this one off as well. When we sign in, to Collaborator, don't tell me I've lost my connection to my demo server. There we go. So now when we sign into Collaborator, we're all used to seeing our home screen for those of us that have been using Collaborator. And one of the new features has to do with how we organize our information here. These headers can be selected for sorting. So you can adjust and view and filter information as you see fit for your particular account. You can also search based on keywords in the action items. That feature's always been here, but the new one that I really like with our little cog here, we can actually select from the custom fields, the review custom fields to be specific, that have been created in Collaborator for review templates, so we can add additional information to my screen. So maybe I'm collecting product type or project names. I can add these as additional headers and now have those as columns in my home screen to let me sort and filter information even further. Lyle's question, is there any plan to support the Serif standard for uploading static code analysis results? This is something that has been talked about by our development team. It is certainly under consideration. I wouldn't have a time frame about when that might be coming, but yeah, we are talking about supporting that standard for static code analysis. It's a great question. Like I said, it is in discussion. I don't have a time frame, but we hope to see that in Collaborator at some point in the future.
Your answer is better than mine, Mel.
I don't know. Yeah, John supports Collaborator. He was the Collaborator guy. He did my job before I came along, and I've kind of picked things up and run with it full bore. I do still sit in on the development meetings. John has taken on additional roles and responsibilities that kind of pulled him away from Collaborator a little bit. So that's where we stand.
I just hang out in webinars like this.
So let's go through our workflow. I'm going to go through Git today. I think this would be a good time to launch our second poll. For those of you who are using Collaborator, please let us know what version of Collaborator you're currently using. So in my Git workflow today, I've got a locally checked out file here, and we're just going to make a quick change to this file. And I'm going to push this up to my Git repo just to kick off a pull request review so we can take a look at these new features. So we'll save that and we'll go ahead and tie this into my GitLab repository. So we'll stage this guy. We'll go ahead and commit this one. And we're going to go ahead and push this upstream to my GitHub repository. And I am working in my dev1 patch branch today, pulled right off of my master.
Hey, Mel, we have a question on upgrade paths.
Sure. A question from Samir. Is there a particular path to follow for upgrading from 1.5 to the latest 13.5? This is a great question and something I should probably put out there in some additional material, such as a webinar or maybe just some video links. The answer is yes. 11.5 can go straight to 13.5. The only thing that we need to check and verify is your database connection. Just make sure that your database is current for version 13.5, and that's the big one. You certainly want to make those backups of your servers before you run that installation. But if everything's up to date, you can go ahead and run the install file right on top of your current server. And it's about a 15-20 minute process at best to get through and update your server to 13.5. 11.1, Narab, yes, 11.1 will also go directly to. So anything that's 11 can upgrade directly to the current versions. Great questions. Thank you.
And do you know, Mel, do you happen to know off the top of your head, there is a version that you can't do a direct upgrade, right?
Correct. Anything before version 9 cannot be done as a direct upgrade. So if you're running 8 or earlier, there are some challenges. You do need to upgrade to version 9 before you consider a direct upgrade from 9 to the latest version. Good question. Thanks, John. All right, so I've gone ahead and pushed my file up. We're going to go ahead and look at my GitLab account. And we're working out of my SB demo repository here today. And what we should see, if I look at my current branches or my current commits, we're going to see that, where did my commit go? Go back to my repository, back to my branch. Yeah, we saw my change one pushed up just 2 minutes ago. Now, this is where we can also set up those pipelines that I was talking about. That's going to fall into your CI/CD process. You can set up a pipeline against your branch. You can specify branches. I'm using the default pipelines here. We can see I've had some failures, but you now use a YAML file in GitLab. And just as a sample of what one of those files looks like, this is what one of my dev teams sent me that he was using to test with. So what we basically do is we come in and we specify the stage that we need, where if a merge request happens, we're going to enforce that collaborator review. And what you're going to see in that process then is options that will say it's a default process or it's a pipeline process. There is more information about the pipelines in the collaborator documentation that takes you out to GitLab for the format and the formatting for the keywords on your YAML file. That information is out there. So we're going to go ahead and create a merge request for my latest update. So we're going to create my merge request from my patch branch. And as a best practice, I like to put my project name in my review title. This actually populates into Collaborator for the review. It does make it easier to pull reports around a given project. So, question from Craig. There are requirements on which versions of clients are compatible with 13.5, 12.x are not. That is a great point. We highly recommend that when you upgrade your server, you also update your client to match that server version. Doesn't always cause problems, and we've done much better with looking at compatibilities from older versions up to the newer versions of the server. If you're using applications such as the Eclipse plugin or the Visual Studio plugins, we highly recommend matching your server and client versions, as that can lead to some communication issues. So we've titled my project, my pull request, and I'm going to go ahead and create my merge request. And as many of you that are using Collaborator may know, this is going to reach out to Collaborator and start my review, as we're going to see here. Now, we're talking about that pipeline. We'll even see here, GitLab tells me that there was no pipeline designed around this particular branch or this particular repository, and it offered me the chance to create that YAML file to enforce that if I want to. So here we're using our default pipeline as you've been used to in the past. So we've created our review. I can follow this link and go directly out to it, but we're also going to just step right into my Collaborator, refresh my review here, and we should see my new review coming in, sort by my deadline so we can see that latest one. And here it is, my GitLab pull request with my project name on it. So we'll go ahead and step into my review, and we're going to find ourselves here in the planning phase. I did add some new information in my presentation workflow today that I neglected to show you. For those of you that are joining us today, the first time seeing Collaborator, the review process is very simple. I know when we log into Collaborator, sometimes the interface may at first seem a little overwhelming. There is a lot of information that can be collected and displayed, but the process is very simple. We start, just as we've seen today, creating the review, in this case through the pull request, and we're going to start here in the planning session as the author. So in this particular part of the review, we're going to meet our template requirements and add our participants, and we'll see we've got many different roles that can be added. So bring your cross-functional teams into Collaborator as well. Maybe QA needs to be involved, or you've got some moderators, or functional test, or UI UX. Bring those folks in to work the review process on your documentation. Once the review has been set up, and all of the required information is met within the template, we move to the inspection phase, where those assigned participants look at and review your documents and your attached artifacts, make comments, and then pass it back to the author in the rework phase, where the author then makes changes, and from that feedback, sends it back to inspection, where your reviewers evaluate those changes and either decide all my bugs are fixed and we move to completion, or we cycle back to rework to have the author make additional changes. And we can even get like I said, our managers or our moderators involved if they need to resolve disputes or offer guidance around particular review artifacts. So my apologies for skipping that slide. It was a brand new slide, but I did want to throw it in there because I was pretty happy with that slide. All right, so here we are in that planning phase. Annotation is an optional phase. It can be used for part of your CI/CD workflows, but today we're going to go strictly planning, inspection, and that rework inspection cycle to our completed version. So we find ourselves here in our review, and one of the points that I wanted to bring up about auto-polling, that's one of our new features. Let's take a look at my repository mappings. So I'm mapped to my GitHub services through my repository hosting services. So we'll see that my SB demo workflow that I'm working on here is mapped from my organization right here into Collaborator. Now, suppose I make another repo in my organization. Rather than going through the process of my easy add repository, adding my token, going through and configuring everything, we now have some new features here. This is the repository auto-polling, as well as the option to ignore repositories. So in our repository auto-polling, we'll see I've got it disabled from a perspective of auto-polling by itself. So I'm telling it no, but I can enable this and check my configured list for new repositories and bring those directly into Collaborator to begin work and use in that pull request fashion that we've just seen. We can also set up our configuration. So I've added my GitLab configuration, and I can also run this manually. So I have my application token set. I've added my configuration. Anytime I add a new repo, rather than having Collaborator look at it, I can manually come in and say, all right, run this, and it's going to go out and query my organization and offer me the option to add any of my repositories that had not yet been added to Collaborator. I can simply select these and then create for selected, and it's going to create those repository linkages right here in Collaborator without any additional work. So it's a great new feature. And if you have sensitive information in some repositories, you can come in and list repositories that are ignored. So you can certainly protect your information. So back to our review, we're going to go ahead and set things up. I'm going to use my team Collaborator here. We'll just use my default template just to make things a little easier today. And we'll see that my pull request automatically added me as the author. I'm going to add a reviewer. And for those of you using some older versions of Collaborator, one of the other more recent features, we flipped our participant and role selections. So now I can do multiple assignments in a given role without having to do them individually. So maybe I want to assign Ella and Patrick as reviewers. I can simply add both of them at one time and add them in that role. So you don't have to go back and pick a reviewer every single time. That multi-select makes it much easier. We're going to run with one reviewer today, so I'm going to take Ella back off of this one. We'll see our remote systems links out to GitLab and our pull requests. Our defect log will populate with those defects as we add them. And our chat window is used for discussions around the review as a whole. Question from Venkatesh. We have currently in place Collaborator GUI 13.2. Does this work if we migrate to 13.5? It should work. Again, unless you're using something like the Eclipse plugin, you'll need to upgrade for that to match your server version. If you're just using the enterprise client GUI, everything 12 and newer on the client GUI should work with version 13. So yeah, you should be you should be safe with the version you have there. Let me go ahead and join in and close my answer. I want to make sure you were asking about, yeah, 13.2 to 13.5 should be a fine. For some reason, I suddenly thought, wait, did he ask about 11? No, you should be fine,
Sure.
Venkatesh, where you are. We're also going to see that we've split out our user messages and system messages from all messages. So you can filter on what you need to see in the chat, kind of declutter that a little bit. One of the other newer features is showing your from and to branches in your pull request. One of the features I didn't even know I needed until I saw it, because now I know exactly where my pull request is going to end up when Collaborator tells GitLab to go ahead and merge. We talked about that new at mention function. In any chat box, we can just start typing that at sign, as we're so used to in other applications, and begin to look for a user, and it will filter through. I want to send Patrick a message. I can click on his name, or I can simply continue to type and send him a message. Do this review as soon as possible. I'm going to add this as a comment, and we're going to see that it puts it in the chat with that highlighted at Pat, indicating this is that notifications message. In the upper right corner, we're going to see our new notifications bell. And when we log into Patrick's screen, we're going to see a little 1 symbol on that icon, as we're used to seeing in many other applications, indicating an unread message. If I select mine, I don't have any notifications at the moment, but we would see a drop-down list of the latest 10 to 15 items that have been sent to me. And we can manage those directly in this list as well. We'll see that in Patrick's screen. We have my attached material from my pull request. Since we're talking a little bit about document review today as well, I'm going to upload some additional files from my document review folder. I'm going to grab my state of code, my requirements doc, some test results, and we'll go with those today. So we'll upload those documents, and we'll see those show up in their own section. Now, one thing I did mention as a new feature, you're going to see the new read function here. As new information comes in and I have unread comments in my review materials, this button, if it's enabled in the server, will allow me to clear all of those unread items with a single click of a button. So we've gone through our setup. We have assigned our teams, we've assigned our participants and template. We have sent out messages if we need to. And now we're ready to move to inspection. So we'll send this to inspection. Patrick will get a notification email that he has new work to do. In addition to this email that he's just gotten because we pushed it to inspection, his at mention would also send him an email if your email server is configured to communicate with Collaborator. So he would have gotten an email with this particular message on it and a link back to this review as well. So let's go ahead and log into Patrick's account. And once again, he could come in and adjust his messages if he wants to, add any additional headers if he wants. We can sort by deadline. We're certainly going to see that new GitLab pull request that we just assigned to him. But we're also going to see that notification icon up here at his notification bell. And if I click on my bell, we're going to see his most recent notifications. We can mark them as read. We can delete them if we're done with them. We can mark it as read and clear that notification. And I'm just going to use this link to go directly into my review today. So it's a great new feature. He can come back and tell me that I've got this one, send that message back to me, and I would see the same thing. And Collaborator is a real-time process, so we're going to see those messages show up in my author's account almost as fast as my participants are adding them. This goes for comments, this goes for defects, and any other at mentions. So let's get to the meat of our review and take a look at our Diff Viewer. So when I select my file, it brings us into our Diff Viewer, which we are used to seeing for previous users of Collaborator. We can simply select a line and leave comments on this line. We're going to see changes highlighted in yellow for lines of code that have changed. Deletions will be in red and added lines will be in green. And just as with the chats outside, I can leave @mentions here as well and send messages to users. I like this file. Just be aware, this is going to send a lot of email. So use this when it's convenient and when it's necessary. Just be aware of what it's going to do for some of your users. I'm going to add that comment and we'll see that message go out to Mel as well. Now I've added a comment to an uploaded file. My advanced mode is going to show me my commit hashes for these files. And that other brand new feature that I mentioned, we're now showing which file, in this case, the commit hash associated with that file, this particular comment was made against. And it's always going to use the latest version that you're comparing in your Diff Viewer. We can also use this as a link to go directly to that file. So maybe we've uploaded some new versions and I want to go back and see what this file looked like. I can simply click on this button and it's going to bring that file up in my Diff Viewer. We can leave comments on those individual lines. And it will also mark on comments and defects where they occurred when we're marking individual lines. Let's take a look at all my whole file. Maybe I want to find a defect. My recursion is missing an R. Recursion needs an R, and we're going to add this as a review defect and classify it using our custom fields. One of the big bonuses for Collaborator are these custom fields. You can classify your defects how you need to, capture metrics on those to better understand your processes and your workflows, and make those changes as necessary. So we're going to call this one build, and we're going to add that defect. Once again, tagging the file, in this case, our latest upload, with that particular item. Now, one of the new features that we talked about was being able to hide our chat. We'll see this little ghost tab here. We can minimize my chat pane if we want to kind of move that out of the way. We can also minimize our header up here at the top. So give yourself a little bit more real estate to work. When you see things you want to change, when you select a line, that chat window will pop back out so you can see what you're working on. And we want to separate these on their own lines as a Java coding standard. We'll start by adding this as a defect. We're going to call it minor because it's really not going to hold up my code from being released. And when I get back to my author's account, we're going to show you how we can actually move that out to Jira and track that as an external issue. So we've marked up some defects. We've left some comments. One of the other best practices I like to use, and I know that for some it can be a little confusing, we have these accept buttons here. And in the overall chat, we have that same accept button. I like to use this as a marker, as a reviewer, to understand what files I've already looked at. So even though this file has defect on it, I'm going to accept it as is, understanding that my review is not going to move forward until those defects are fixed. But we're going to notice that my latest commit now has a little checkbox in the icon as it does above the individual file. Now, the reason this becomes useful is if I step back out into my review, Patrick can quickly see, as well as anyone else in the review, that Patrick is done with this file. He's made his comments, he's marked his defects. Patrick doesn't need to give this file any more attention until a new version is uploaded, which will clear this check mark. So this becomes an easy way for your reviewers to understand what they've looked at and what may need additional attention. So let's go into my document review. We're going to mark up a few things here. Graphics are a visual inspection. So I'm going to drop this in because we're in 2021 and we released our 2020 State of Code review last year. So we want to update this to the latest graphic. And if you need that 2020 State of Code review, that is available out on smartbear.com under the Collaborator section to understand how code review helps your process, as well as for code and for documents. So we're going to add this as a defect. We're going to call it major, and we'll just call this documentation. Add a couple more. I know relative is spelled incorrectly here. Let me go ahead and put that back where it was. I didn't click on add. This is major documentation. We want to add that defect, make sure it sticks. And then we're going to go ahead and mark up this second one and add that as a defect. Now, one of the new features that I mentioned was the ability to lock down push pins to only their creators. that's set in your roles. Because right now, if we want to take a look, so I've added that defect. So Patrick can simply come in and drag and drop this pin to another location if we want to. And actually, he may have this locked down. We added that one. Yeah, I may have it locked down for Patrick at the moment. Oh, no, it's showing that it's moved. I keep forgetting Patrick is on a private browser session, so it doesn't refresh quite as quickly. You're going to see that my pin was actually telling me that it had been moved. So if we refresh my screen, we're going to see that pin in the new location where I just dropped it. So it's now here. We want to move this back over here. Once again, we'll see that it was moved. And if we refresh my screen, that pin will move. You won't see this type of delay if you're working in a real-time browser rather than a private session. It will refresh. So you can lock other users out from being able to move a creator's pin. So maybe I don't want my author saying, well, I don't care about that, and drag it off someplace. Only Patrick could be able to move this if you set that in your roles configuration. So again, a new feature to help protect the information and make sure that what the reviewers are marking are what's getting reviewed. So we're done with this file. Using my best practice, we'll mark this. And I'm going to step forward to my next file. We're just going to mark up another defect, change this phrase. We'll add this as a review defect, and we'll just call it minor documentation. Mark is accepted, and we're going to step forward. Excel works the same way as documents with, but rather than using push pins, we actually highlight individual cells, and we can leave our defects here, CT29 instead of 28, and we'll add this as review defect. And we'll just call it data access and add that. Again, we'll mark this as fixed. And we can move on to our next file. So this is going to loop us back around to my main.java file since we had skipped that one to begin with. And if we step back out into my review, we're going to see all of my defects that have been populated, as well as Patrick's check marks indicating that he is complete with these files. So at this point, Patrick is done with everything he wants to do. Let's go ahead and send this out to Rework. And my author would get notified to pick up the workload and make some changes. There are some questions in the chat. Can we set up GitLab project with default reviewers? Not sure what you're asking there. You can go to GitLab. You can specify reviewers right out of GitLab. Those will populate through into the Collaborator review if you're specifying them from GitLab. You can also specify based on subscriptions. So maybe you require certain files to be reviewed. You can put some subscriptions around files as well as users. I think the best way to pull those in, if you've got them populated directly in GitLab, would be to drop them in as reviewers or groups in teams in GitLab and bring those directly into the Collaborator review. It's probably the easiest way to handle that question. So let's make our changes. I'm going to go ahead and make my updates to my file. And we'll go ahead and split these out for fun. We'll save that. Actually, let's put my revision on here so I know what I'm doing. Let's add, just for a little bit more color, we can add a few more lines. Let's delete one, just so we can see some fun colors. So we'll go through my same process. We'll add it, we'll commit it. And because my pull request is already open on my branch, as soon as I push this up to my patch branch, it's going to update my Collaborator review for me. And we're going to see that here momentarily. We're in Patrick's window, so let me step to my window. And in my system messages, we're going to see that that new version has already been uploaded. If you want to see all messages, you can certainly go and look at everything grouped together. We'll also see those app mentions that Patrick has sent to me, the one that he sent to right out of that comment window as well as out of the overall chat. So you can send those messages from any available chat window within Collaborator. Go ahead and mark these as red and clear that icon. We can mark these items as red. You may have requirements for your authors to do so. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of new information here. Because I've enabled this in my server, I can come in and simply with one click, mark all those items as red. So let's go ahead and update our documents as well. I'm going to upload some new files. And from my changes folder, we're going to grab my requirements document and we're going to grab my test results. And we're going to open this, upload them to my review. So as in the past, my documents here had the same names, so it was very easy to upload those in bulk. Collaborator can simply identify the previous file because the names were the same. We've also added this new button here with version 13.5 that we can upload a new version. If we're using this option, I can actually specify a different file name, in this case, my 2020 State of Code review. I'm going to upload that, and because we used our button here, it knows to associate that new file with the file previously uploaded under a different name. We'll also see that all of Patrick's check marks have been cleared. So when Patrick logs in to take a look at his work, he'll see that these all need attention. Just as an example of our Jira integration, I am going to take this one, even though we did fix this and resolve this, I am going to push this one particular item by editing it and exporting the issue directly to my Jira integration. This will create a new issue if it's enabled. I can add additional comments, additional items here, select my project, select my issue type, and go ahead and create that issue. It will reach out to Jira for that bidirectional communication and give me a hyperlink right out to that particular artifact and issue. Following this link, we'll take it out here, show me this particular information where I can make assignments. I'm also going to have a hyperlink back into that review. So if you're managing things out of Jira with your code reviews and your document reviews, if someone comes into a particular issue that has a review open, they'll see this web link available and see what state that current review is in. In addition to the basic workflow, we've also released a new plugin for Collaborator as it applies to Jira that gives us a little bit more functionality. We can see what state the review is in. In addition, we can link to existing reviews right out of Jira. We can create new reviews right out of Jira as well. This simply reserves the review number that you can then go in and attach documents and artifacts to. This is used typically in the manual or the GUI workflow. The pull request workflow, as you know, generates its own reviews, and you would simply link to the existing review from that pull request. If I select my item, we're going to get a little bit more information. We're going to actually see who's involved in that review and what their role is. So the plugin is available from smartbear.com. It is a direct download. Information for installing is in our documentation. So let's go ahead and move back to inspection and let Patrick go ahead and review our work. So Patrick's going to see these items as we step into my files. We're going to see all of our changes. Again, those new lines, our change lines. And if I go ahead and select one of these, we'll see that, and I leave a comment, I'm going to add that. We're going to see that it does, in fact, mark this against my new version of the file on my latest commit. So you can quickly go see, maybe I want to see this version. I can select this button. It's already showing. Let's go ahead and select a different one. My first version that we were looking at. If I want to see this file, I can simply click on this button and it will take and show me that new version of the file. So if you want to compare files, it's very easy to select from the identifiers here. Well, we're happy with everything we see. We'll go ahead and mark this as resolved. This one was moved externally, but we can see my author did fix it. It's simply a matter of reopening this review, or pardon me, this defect, marking it as resolved, and then we can move on to our next file. So we'll accept this one and move to our next file, where we'll see that visual inspection to identify changes in graphics. So I've got my new graphic that I asked for. We can mark this one as resolved. Relative has been corrected, along with a lot of additional changes. So there may be changes you weren't expecting. that will be highlighted in the before and after documents as well. So we'll go ahead and mark this one as resolved since we updated our relative as we expected. We can accept this document and move on. Same thing with our PDFs. We'll see those changes, red in the previous document, green in the new document. One feature that we are in development on that should be coming out fairly soon, you will be able to lock these together, and rather than scrolling from page to page, in this case I have 2 pages, this would be a continuous scroll type of operation that you're used to in so many other applications. So that is a feature that is coming for document review. So we'll go ahead and accept our current changes, accept this one, and move on. In addition to being able to visually inspect, we can also use our up and down arrows to go from diff to diff. This becomes extremely useful in long files, whether they're code or document, or in this case, there may be stuff that changed that I'm not seeing highlighted because of, in this case, conditional formatting. I can simply step and we'll see that this cell did change. Our other cells are changed, indicated in the yellow, but this cell, because of conditional formatting, we're not seeing that yellow highlighting. So we can use our up and down arrows to go from difference to difference. We'll see there's a couple other pass fails that changed, and we can mark off the item that we asked to be changed and accept our document. So back out in my review, we can see that all of my items have been addressed. No more red defects to hold up our review process. So we're going to go ahead and send this to completed state. My author is going to see that as well. And again, my author had requirements to mark all items as red, so we can simply do so here and dismiss our review, concluding our review workflow demonstration today with many of the new features that we talked about at the top of the hour. So with that, let me step back to my presentation. And let's talk a little bit about our surprise announcement. Andrew, are you with me?
Yeah.
All right.
Super excited to announce that Collaborator is going to be integrating support for Simulink. So for anyone who loves MathWorks and uses their products, this is a pretty big deal. And we're excited to offer an early access special preview to Simulink. And Mel, if you wouldn't mind posting the link to where you can find more information on Simulink. We do have a landing page set up so that if you're interested in rolling Simulink out into your Collaborator instance, our sales team would be happy to help you get ramped up in that. So Mel, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with the crowd. Thank you. And then we do have one other announcement to make. Mel, if you wouldn't mind jumping over to that. So if you enjoyed webinaring with us today, we do have another one scheduled April 14th with NVIDIA. So anyone interested in innovation, AI, and curious to see how other companies are using Collaborator to streamline their code review and document review processes, feel free to join and register for that webinar on April 14th. I'm going to ask Mel if you could share that link as well to register for that webinar.
Sure thing, Andrew. Just a moment. Go ahead and drop this in. There we go. We had some other polls. I got so tied up in what I wanted to show you guys today, I missed some of my additional polls. We have anything we want to share, Andrew? Go ahead.
We do have one poll that I do want to launch before the end of this.
All right.
Get some thoughts on what content everyone is interested in consuming next from us and how we can be of service to you. And once this webinar concludes, we are going to post a survey to get your thoughts on future topics and ideas you'd like to hear from us on, and kind of curate our content around your journey.
And Samir did come in with another question. Are there plans for our development to be containerized for deployment? So we're not planning on doing a specific container type of deployment for Collaborator. However, it can be deployed in that type of situation. I know that the development team has made available out on GitLab or GitHub some information on how to containerize in Docker. That seems to be the most popular request. That is how we actually deploy on our development stream for testing. So it can be containerized. We do typically recommend to go on a full version server or in a virtual machine. But yeah, container option is something that can be done, Samir. Good question. I know I glossed over my Q&A slide. Do we have any additional questions? So questions and answers for today. Paul had a question. When uploading a file with a different name, can you still use the drag and drop, or do you have to use the file upload? It's a good question, Paul. Not something I've ever tested. So let's take a quick look at that. I know we're right at the top of the hour. I do appreciate everybody's patience. I do have another few minutes if there are some additional questions. I'm simply gonna, let's reopen my review here and let's test your question. I'm gonna go back to my desktop and my document reviews. And let's see, I've got state of code. Let's change the name of this one. We'll call this state of code new. And let's see if this works for us. My guess would be you have to use the button. If we drop this in here, it is going to add that as a separate file. So the answer to your question, Paul, is yes, we do have to use the upload new version button in order to bring that different file name in for review. Good question. Thank you. If there's nothing else, thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your patience. We appreciate your business.